timed to whatever the final point in election night was before people tuned in, declaring Ron DeSantis essentially the odds-on favorite for the nomination and wanting to discard Trump. My personal view is that Donald Trump should never be underestimated. Both of these figures bring tremendous capabilities to the table. Donald Trump put on the map places and peoples that were never on the map for
including
Republicans.
DeSantis, by the way.
Yeah, of course, a huge ally of DeSantis and endorsed him for governor in Florida. I think that the demise of Donald Trump and the rise of DeSantis that's being argued, I think we have to let the process play out, and we have to let both of them make their cases to the American people. Sort of the conventional wisdom around DeSantis essentially is that he's Trump, but younger, without the baggage, hyper competent, and he can bring sort of all Trump's positives to the table and none of Trump's negatives to the tables. On the other hand, Donald Trump, again, is someone who did lead a movement, who put places on the map that had never been on the map in recent memory, certainly, for Republicans, and who has an intense fan base and a large fan base that's unmatched, certainly in my lifetime, and maybe in the political history of America. And that shouldn't be discounted. Still in polls prior to midterm election night, Trump had a significant advantage over DeSantis. But obviously, this was a huge, resounding victory for DeSantis. And this helps in building the case that he is essentially, he is the next Trump. He is the person to inherit that mantle. I think it's way too early to call it one way or the other. But absolutely, he's done an exceptional job in using executive power to put forth a policy program that's broadly appealing. And that's one of the reasons why the left hates him so much. And if he continues to do well, he'll be subjected to even more intense attacks, the likes of which we haven't seen before. And it's going to be fascinating to see this dynamic play out. In fact, we're going to see a proxy battle, presumably between these two figures when it comes to the runoff election in Georgia on December 6th, where there's going to be calls for DeSantis to go to Georgia on Herschel Walker's behalf in this Senate contest against Raphael Warnock. And there's going to be calls for Donald Trump to go down there as well. It's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out. It gives me pause. The establishment members who are out there saying it's DeSantis's time now, I don't think he will be co-opted by that establishment. But there are people out there who have hated Donald Trump's guts forever, and they look for any excuse they can possibly use to say, now we have to discard him. He's awful. He's the worst. It's time to move on. It concerns me that they're circling around here. But that said, I think these are two formidable figures in their own right, each with remarkable track records of accomplishment and achievement. And it's going to be fascinating. It's going to be historic to see how this plays out, to the extent there is a struggle essentially for the soul of the Republican Party between these two men.
Well, I'm a fan of both, and it is a tough dilemma. I want to ask you about Joe Biden. I think that the Democrats were putting on a brave face of unity until the midterms were done. Very few local candidates invited Biden to campaign for them. I mean, he wasn't exactly a charismatic figure. Even during his own campaign, he really didn't draw crowds. Now that the midterms are over, do you think the knives will come out to replace him? Even for those who like Joe Biden, and I don't know who such a person would be, just in terms of energy level and cognitive decline, the prospect of him running again in 2 years for a 4-year term, I mean, it's so unlikely. And you've got to think that, I don't know, maybe Gavin Newsom wants to take a crack at it. Kamala Harris, I think, is just an awful person, but she probably wants her chance. I don't know. There's got to be others champing at the bit. Maybe Beto thinks he'll have better success nationally. Do you think that the keepers of the Democratic Party, which are probably the New York Times and a few other institutions like that, do you think they're going to say, all right, Biden, time to have a graceful exit? I remember my friend Joel Pollack said to me he did not think that Biden would run again in 2024. Do you share the same view?
Well, first, let me just say I think Republicans everywhere would be cheering from the rooftops if Robert Francis O'Rourke, if the Democrats waste tens of millions of dollars on him yet again, or Stacey Abrams for that matter. You rightly note that there was more than a whispering campaign of organs like the New York Times and the Washington Post before the election, essentially calling Joe Biden a liar, pointing out, which we've known for decades, but they were actually saying it out loud. They were talking about, his myriad weaknesses and so-called gaffes, which are really him not being cognitively sound, self-evidently, I think. But then he sort of got the last laugh on election night because there wasn't this shellacking in spite of the widespread disappointment with him as president. He himself said, or at least aides around him have leaked, that he plans to run in 2024. He was asked essentially by reporters, handpicked, I believe, and telegraphed, what do you plan to change on anything going forward, given where the polls were going into this race? And he essentially said no. Now that the people are learning about my agenda, it's going to be even more popular. So he continues to put up a brave face and say essentially that I'm full speed ahead, whatever speed the head is, and running. I can't imagine that, to your point, and Newsom et al. Won't be running against him in 2024. I'm not sure what the benefit is for him to run in 2024. He's made the case essentially before that if it's Trump, then he poses the best chance of anyone among the Democrats. I don't know if that's true. So my thought had always been that, especially if there had been a huge shellacking for Democrats this time around, that he would have been pushed out before 2024. Now he would probably make the case, how could you do that? Look, my agenda didn't kill us, essentially, in a historically awful environment, and when the precedent for midterms is that the incumbent party gets crushed. So I now am less convinced, I guess, that he won't be running. That said, I could easily see him losing a primary if he is to throw his hat into that race in 2024. I just don't see how Democrats could possibly feel confident with him at the helm. But then again, all that said, imitation is the highest form of flattery. And you talked about the fact that he literally ran a basement campaign in 2020, and other Democrats mimic that. John Fetterman mimicked that this time around. Katie Hobbs refused to debate Kari Lake the entire time. So that seemed to work. So if nothing else, Democrats have emulated him to some extent, and progressives evidently view him as a useful vassal for putting forth their agenda with, I guess, a purportedly moderate, old white male face to it. And I think it appears that that's effective. Now, all that said, I expect things to markedly decline by any number of measures over the next 2 years, and that's gonna impact things as well. And I don't think that the American people, by any stretch, resoundingly voted for high crime and being poorer in this election. So those trends continue, and we'll see if there are Republicans who actually run with a compelling vision to combat that going into 2024.
What you just saw was an excerpt from my nightly show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every weekday, I do a monologue. Usually it's about half an hour. Then I interview an interesting guest, and then we read my hate mail or my fan mail, whichever is more fun. It's only available behind a paywall, though. That's how we pay our bills here at Rebel News. We don't take a dime from Justin Trudeau. But the good news is it's only $8 a month, about half the price of Netflix. And in addition to my nightly show, you also get weekly shows from 4 other friends here at Rebel News. So you're getting 36 shows a month just for $8. I think it's worth it. And even if you're not quite sure, do it anyways, because we rely on viewers like you to keep us free and independent. I promise you I'll never take a dime from Trudeau. Just go to rebelnewsplus.com and click subscribe. Thanks.